back, everybody, to the Greater Community. This show exists to highlight ministries happening out in our local and global community. And today we have Ryan and Monica Reeves, who are on staff with Cru here in Kansas City. And so we're excited to have them. So whether you are watching this on YouTube or listening to us on a podcast, we want to encourage you just to jump in, to listen. As you hear things that you're curious about, feel free to comment in the comment section, share this information with other people. But Ryan and Monica, we're excited to have you guys. Tell us a little bit about yourselves and tell us a little bit about what you do.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, we're excited to be here. Thanks for having us. We're, as Tom said, Ryan and Monica Reeves, and we have been married for about 10 years, almost 10 years, coming up next month. And we work with Cru Campus Ministry. I'm from Colorado, and Monica moved out there to work with Cru a while ago, and that's how we kind of met, through work and her moving to be closer to where I was. And she has family out here, so we moved back to Kansas City for a while. And then what happened after that?
Well, we've been here back in Kansas City for about a year. We moved to Manhattan, Kansas for about 3 years for me to do a master's degree in communication studies. So I finished that up about a year ago. We're back in Kansas City. This is kind of always planned for this to be our home base for the indefinite future. So we enjoyed our time in Manhattan, but we're very excited to be back here and working with Cru. Ryan works with the team locally, and then I work in our fund development department. And so my job, I oversee staff in several different states and work more from home. So Zoom calls are kind of like normal for me, even before and after COVID. So I work to help train and coach our staff so that they're fully funded, financially faithful, all of our staff across our 8-state region.
Awesome.
Yeah, and I work directly with students. On our team has 29 campuses, Kansas City Metro team. 29 campuses in Kansas City and north and south and a little bit east of Kansas City that we work with.
So for those who aren't familiar with Cru, I know there's lots of different campus ministries that are on campuses throughout the country. What is kind of some distinctive aspects of Cru that kind of distinguish what you guys are doing on campuses?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'll share a little bit and then you can share more. Cru, we focus on both evangelism and discipleship. There's some ministries that have more of a focus on one or the other, and lots of ministries do focus on both, kind of like we do. But we say the 3 words that describe what we do are win, build, and send. So we win students, faculty, staff, whatever group of people we're ministering to Christ, by sharing the gospel, and just sharing life with one another in the context of relationships, growing people up in their faith. So that's building, and then sending them out to win and build and send others. And also we just have a real kind of missionary spirit of reaching the whole world. So it started as just reaching students in the 1950s at UCLA in California, but now there's different ministries of Cru all around the world in 190 plus countries. And so really trying to, through students in the campus ministry that we're still a part of, but also in other ways with other ministries under the umbrella of Cru, trying to reach the whole world, to fulfill the Great Commission, to make disciples of all nations. So
I think that's a good summary. Really, we've both been working with Cru for so long because we have such a heart for college-age students. God used Cru in our lives significantly when we were in college, and so we still just love that age. And we know that many of them go on to walk with God for a lifetime and have that impact wherever He leads them. And so that's our heart. And then with my role of getting to help and train and coach people, I love getting to help send some of those people to other ministries too. So I'm based in the campus ministry, work primarily there, but helping to send people that are going to work with, like, our Athletes in Action is a ministry of Cru, works directly with college and professional athletes, or Family Life, working with those that are trying to reach families. So yeah, it's so hard to see people grow and to help them know the Lord, move closer to Him, and have an impact for Him.
And Monica, you mentioned a little bit about how you got connected. Can you tell us a little bit more about just how does one become part of campus staff, right? This is something you weren't born as a Cru, part of on Cru staff, but how did you get connected into this ministry to the point where you wanted to do this as a vocation?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I grew up just north of here in Atchison, Kansas. I was born here in Kansas City, and then we moved there. So I grew up there with a really strong foundation. Went to a great elementary school, Lutheran elementary school, and really was excited about my faith. But I went to college and then kind of drifted from the Lord until my junior year, realizing that I had kind of just dismissed this whole part of my life as just sort of head knowledge and facts, and really wanted to come back to figure out, what do I really believe, and do I want to live this faith out? And so God, in my life particularly, God used Cru to help me kind of figure that out. I got to know some staff and students, and as I got involved and got to start growing and got to try some of our summer mission or spring break trips, that kind of stuff. And then I interned right after I graduated. For me, it was kind of an easy, at that point, it was easy for me to see God's leading of God had used it in my life. And then I loved being a part of seeing students reached. And I think Ryan will share his story too, but it's fairly common for a lot of us that we were impacted, especially for those in the campus ministry, and reached by, the Lord used it in some way in our life. And then that led us to, I kind of like to do this too. So that was 19 years ago for me. I never really knew I'd be doing it this long, but yeah, so that's how I got involved.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and share how I got involved too. So I grew up in a Christian home most of the time with my mom, and then my dad, when I was with him, my parents were divorced, so he wasn't religious at all, so we didn't go to church, but I kind of believed in God from an early age, but didn't really walk with God, I'd say, until college. And so I learned a whole lot more about my faith in college and how it impacted my daily life. And what especially was transformative and amazing for me was realizing how God's acceptance of me and His love for me was what I really needed, because I, even though I believed God, saved me from my sins so that I could be in a relationship with Him for eternity through Jesus Christ, I thought I needed to get all my acceptance and love from other people. God was just there for, when I died, so I could go to heaven. But learning in college about, how much God loves me and how much He accepts me and others who are Christians, really helped me to see that I could serve and love other people, not to get their approval or to get things from them, but to, just be an expression of the love that God had already given me. And that was more than I ever needed. So that was really cool. And then, learning about the ministry of the Holy Spirit, and that God living in me means that I have power to live the life that God calls me to live, the Christian life. That was a real key thing too. And I kept on learning all these different things. Those are just a couple of them. And then by the time I was about to graduate, after my junior year of college and going on a summer mission with Cru as well, I just thought, man, I wish every student had the opportunities to grow like I have in college. And I'd also started to share my faith with non-believers too by that point. And so I thought, boy, I just need to at least take a couple of years to, give God back some time that he poured into me. And so, that was 18 years ago for me, instead of just a couple of years like I thought it might be. But I just love seeing, like I said, students get to go through some of the same learning experiences and really deepen their faith, or to begin, faith as well. So that's why I'm still on staff. That's why we're both still on staff after 18 and 19 years, I guess.
And obviously you can tell just by listening to you that this is a deep calling for you. Where do you see kind of the maybe unique opportunities or the unique need that college students have specifically? Like this ministry to college students obviously is very important. You find high value in it. Where do you see that value? Where do you see kind of the need that you're trying to meet in college students in today's culture, I guess?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
One thing that has really kind of summed things up for me the last few years is thinking about the different pictures of who Jesus is to so many people and the different images of who he is, who he's supposed to be. And so I really kind of boil our job down to helping people meet the real Jesus and then making a decision about him based on who he actually is instead of who I think he is or who the culture says he is. So that's motivating for me, even in the role that I do now of training and coaching staff. It's to help them go to those specific places. And so helping be a part of kind of impacting even more areas than what I could personally reach. That's still the motivation of just, there's so many varied views about who Jesus is and was. And so we have that opportunity to help people meet the real Jesus of the Bible.
Right.
Yeah. Kind of going along with that. In the 1950s, when Cru started, most people of whatever age kind of had a church background, especially by the time they were in college or older. Had a church background, kind of knew Bible stories, even if they weren't a believer in Christ. They kind of knew, what Christianity was all about. Could probably tell you what the gospel was, even if you helped them define that word gospel. If they didn't know that word, they would still kind of know what the gospel was, the good news of Christ coming down and dying on a cross to forgive people of their sins, all that. But nowadays, more and more people, especially college age and under, haven't grown up in any church background or in any knowledge of who God is, or that there is a God, or that haven't read the Bible, all those kind of things. And then pairing that with Generation Z is supposedly the most anxious generation to date. They have a lot of anxiety, and I think that's fueled by social media and trying to look certain ways for everybody all the time and being always connected to everything, and so that creates more stress, anxiety, and just they worry about things. They really want to reach out to the world around them. They're also really high into activism and helping other people, but they often don't know how. And then they're so busy plugged into their phones and other devices that they might not take the steps that they really want to take. So that then leads to more anxiety because they're not sure. They want to do something for the world, but they're not sure how. And then they don't have any background of religion, but they've heard, like Monica said, that Christians, are judgmental, and so you shouldn't, be around those judgmental people because we need to accept everybody. So they're very, very accepting generation too, more so than generations in the past. So kind of throw that all together, and they're, a little bit of a mess, like we all are. But so they really do need Jesus, but yet they have the least knowledge of Jesus of any generation so far, at least in the U.S. And so we get to enter in and really give them something that they don't even have the knowledge of, and point them to the Jesus who can give them purpose, because they really want that purpose and be the embodiment of true love and acceptance. That they want to live in an accepting, loving world. So it's really fun.
So when you have that Jesus conversation with a student on campus, how does that typically go? Are people wanting to talk about Jesus? Is it an easier conversation? Is it a curious conversation? Is it all over the map? How are those conversations going on campus when you bring up Jesus?
Yeah, good question.
Well, it definitely, like a lot of things, varies, I would say. Ryan has more kind of immediate experience. When I was in grad school, I had lots of opportunities to work right alongside a lot of students, so that was really fun and a good opportunity to have some ongoing conversation. But I would say, for the most part, at least in this part of the country, people still remain pretty open to at least have a conversation. I think people are curious, sometimes are wondering, like Ryan was talking, kind of that purpose and people wanting to make a difference. But so seeing people like Christians who are really motivated by that kind of vision can be kind of intriguing. I think people want to know more about, like, so why are you so serious about this, and why is this important to you? I have found a real openness, even in people's views that I knew were varied and different from mine. We could have a real back and forth conversation. And a lot of that, for me, the conversations at grad school were definitely built on, I knew them well. We had some interaction and context to draw from, but I think you could speak more to this. But even just meeting people on campus for the first time, it seems that people are still pretty interested in talking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so usually, how we approach someone that we don't know, and usually we staff try and go with students and help them learn how to share their faith, which often they're reluctant to do first, but like I was in college. But they often find, it's a lot easier and more fun than they thought it would be and less scary. But approaching somebody new, we often use one of these kind of survey tools or others. We have a lot of different survey tools. So we start up a conversation usually by asking for their help, for a student's help, because people like to help out other people often. And so then we also get to know who the student we're talking to is and what their background is through the survey tools, or sometimes we'll just ask about a current event that's going on. If there's something that's on people's minds already, ask what they think about that. But just asking questions, because that's what Jesus did a lot, is ask people questions to reveal their own needs to themselves. Jesus would help people see their need for him through just the right questions. And we're not Jesus, so we don't have all the right questions all the time, but we do have the Holy Spirit, God, living inside us. So we ask to be Spirit led. First of all, we'll, even before we talk to somebody, we always try and pray. And our definition of successful witnessing in Cru is going out and sharing the gospel in the power of the Holy Spirit and leaving the results to God. So we always ask, God, please lead us to the right people, fill us with your Spirit, give us, the right questions to ask and the right way to transition into the gospel if you, give us that chance. So when we're asking people questions, often about what they believe as well, then, if they say they already think they're a Christian, often we'll kind of ask, what does it mean that you're a Christian? And if a friend asked you, how do I become a Christian? What would you tell them? Things like that. And if they're not a Christian, often by the end of the survey, they've shared a lot about themselves. So we can say something like, would we be able to share a little bit about something that's really important to us, or about, what we believe about these questions that we've been asking you? And sometimes we go through a booklet like this type of booklet, which is a little gospel presentation. Sometimes we just talk about the gospel. But we always also, whether we get to share the gospel or not in that first conversation, we try and get, contact information, follow up, and invite them to hang out for coffee later, or, to do some fun sports day that we're doing or whatever, and leave the relationship open instead of just saying, okay, thanks for sharing your thoughts, bye.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think people can genuinely, can tell if you're genuinely concerned about their answers or if you have an agenda. And so like what we as staff and always with our students, this is not about having this agenda of I'm going to say these 5 things no matter what in this conversation, and I'm going to share this 4-point outline of the gospel. It's going into it really loving people and listening. And I know that we've both seen this as like a lot of people, I think, don't have anyone in their life that genuinely asks some of these questions and cares or listens. So if we approach them and really want to hear their story, when we say, could you help us out with something, we explain like we want to know what students are thinking. We kind of do these informal surveys to get a feel for what the campus is like, and so people hopefully can tell that we do care about their story, and we care about where God might be at work in their life, whether they even see it. But ultimately listening and trying to love them no matter how the conversation goes.
Yeah, and we also try and train our students up in how to, reach their friends, their classmates, coworkers, family as well. And so, not just doing it with random people that they meet in a student union or in a library or whatever. But and then we're reaching out, to people in various ways. And as we build those relationships, sharing with them too. And I was going to say too, everystudent.com is a website that we often use in evangelistic conversations because it's a website that has millions of views each year and has a lot more views during COVID times actually than it has even before then. Lots more people getting online and asking questions about like who is God and things like that. So this website has hundreds of articles about things that students would be asking about, even like what does Christianity say about sex, or all kinds of things. And so we'll often point people to that website or say, hey, something in the conversation brings up something that an article on everystudent.com addresses. Hey, there's this website. Could we check out what some experts have to say about this thing that you were talking about? And so we can do it that way too.
Yeah, that's awesome. You earlier on, as you were talking about the distinctives of kind of this generation, it kind of raised a question in my mind. How do you see how have things changed since you were in campus ministry to how things are on campus today? Whether everything from the environment on campus to how ministry is done. How have you seen things change over the last 18, 19 years?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that's a good question.
I think even before COVID, there was a lot more like online engagement with people, like more people using even like the booklet I held up, gospel tract type thing. There's an app called the God Tools app that has that and some other things in it. And there's a Jesus film. Jesus Film is another ministry of CRU, and it's it started with the life of Jesus as told in the Gospel of Luke on film, and it's been shared with billions of people around the world. It's the most viewed film in history and most translated, so it's in the most languages, over 1,200 languages. But now there's this Jesus Film app as well, and it has not just the Jesus Film itself in many different languages, but a bunch of short films. And so attention span is another thing that's gone down as the generations have changed.
In all ages.
Yeah, in
not
all
just
ages.
in younger people.
But younger people have a really short attention span. So we used to be able to more so point people to let's watch this film together. It's an hour and a half or whatever. And now there's these dozens of short films because people probably aren't going to sit down to watch an hour and a half film and discuss it, but they'll watch a 3-minute thing and then discuss that. So more using technology tools like that is one thing, and having to do that and having to do things shorter so that they're more accessible to more people still.
Yeah, and there's pros and cons. I think like when we both started, I had a cell phone barely when I first reported to campus. And so, we didn't really text a lot. You just did, kind of everything was just different, and even how we communicate as initial contact. And so everything from like the format to like, how all of us are changing with technology around us. And then I think as I look back on ministry, I think it's evolving into more almost like smaller connect points. I think like I started out at Missouri State in Springfield, and we had a big ministry there, and it was lots of fun. A lot of people came to Christ through coming to some of the events. But I think now, I don't know what it's like there now anymore. Some places do still have some large gatherings, but I think a lot of what we've seen in the last few years is most people decide to follow Christ because of connecting to other people who are following Christ and getting involved like in a discussion group, a Bible study, or developing that relationship over several months. And so it seems like too, ministry's changing a little bit more, at least in our experience, from not just events or not just similar to church, not just having a church service in a building that people come to, but going out and also trying to build those relationships, more. Not that we didn't do that at the beginning too. We always focused on those relationships, but I think sometimes those bigger things, maybe people came to those kinds of things more. It was kind of just the way that a lot of organizations function. And I think that's changing a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. I'll throw in just an example of that at UMKC, where I'm working right now. There's 7 different community group Bible studies, and they're limited, especially the ones that meet in person are limited to 10 people right now because of COVID. But So there's about 70 students in these 7 groups, and there used to be also a weekly meeting kind of to gather all the community groups together. But I think last year or the year before, we weren't back here yet, but they kind of did away with the weekly gathering because, again, it just wasn't as big a draw. People aren't drawn to that as much as they used to be in the past. Like when I was a student, I lived for the weekly meeting. I was looking forward to it all week long, and it seemed like a lot of people were similar to me. But for students now, it's not that big a deal because they want, the more personal connection or smaller groups. So they do a monthly gathering at UMKC now, and not nearly as many people come to that. But there's a lot of people in those small groups, and that's where, real learning and real growth happens anyways too. So.
Yeah. You mentioned COVID earlier. How does on-campus ministry work in the days where people are being very cautious about talking to new people and introducing new people into their bubble? But imagine that raises a whole new set of challenges, but maybe new opportunities. So how has COVID impacted campus ministry?
Yeah, so here in Kansas City on our team, I'm the one actually of us two that's on the Kansas City team, really. But the majority of the Kansas City CRU team is going on campuses that are allowing student orgs to do things on campus. But I'm staying home, so I'm one of the very cautious people. And then one other couple on our team is also doing that. But so those who are going to campus, from what I've heard them talk about, the campuses are a lot less crowded. There's a lot less people just hanging out. So if you go try and meet new people, it's harder to find those people, but they still are finding people to minister to in person. But we've done a lot more virtual strategy of meeting people too. Like at the beginning of the year, we followed as UMKC CRU Instagram page, followed all kinds of, especially freshmen who were already in other groups that UMKC made on Instagram or other types of social media, even Facebook things too, even though students aren't on Facebook as much nowadays. But then a bunch of students followed us back as UMKC CRU, and then we were able to, personally message those people on there and ask them to fill out a little survey, whereas normally we'd do, and we did that too at UMKC actually, but a survey table where we'd have some giveaways and, it used to be a paper survey and now it's moved to a digital survey anyways. So that it was good that it was already a digital survey we were doing. But have a little link to a survey, they fill it out and indicate their interest in things from getting involved in CRU things or Bible studies to learning more about what it is to know God, or what that even means, stuff like that. And then those people either fill out the survey or they don't, but lots of them did. Once they followed us back, we engaged with them or gave them an opportunity to come to a Zoom meeting that we were having to learn more about what we were doing, and just sent them a link to that, a Zoom invite, things like that. So just engaging with people in all the online methods possible, and then seeing who gets back to us and who we can engage with further, and then helping our students to reach out personally to their friends that are also going to school but may not be going to in-person classes, because a lot of our students and student leaders are not doing any in-person classes as well, so it's all phone conversations and Zoom calls with them too, like for discipleship and everything like that.
Right. It seems like there's a thought process in young adults that I talk to, at least, where when you talk about sharing your faith, one of the objections is like, well, I know what I believe. I don't want to impress on somebody else what I believe. And so there's kind of an assumption that when you start to kind of share your faith, that will be met with some, that walls will be put up. But, obviously campus ministries have been going and thriving, obviously as it looks different, but
Mhm.
Has that been your experience? I mean, do you find that people are kind of more private about their, you know, own personal faith convictions, or are they more wanting to talk to you? Are they wanting to have that conversation? Do they feel like, man, yeah, finally, do they expect that? I guess, yeah. What kind of response have you found as you're on campus or virtually trying to talk about Jesus and share your faith? What's that been like? How receptive have people been?
Mm-hmm. Can you talk about what you've heard and
Yeah,
experienced?
I can talk about even in the last few years, kind of the change, and then you can talk more specifically about right now if it's different. But I think I was surprised, even like in grad school again, I was surprised at, I figured once people knew because I was working with crew full time while in school, and I thought, once people know what I do, I wonder if they'll even want to have a conversation with me, because there are such connotations in the culture about what it means to be a Christian. And, some people tend to think we're judgmental and closed off and all those things. And so I was kind of unsure, and I think probably more hesitant than I needed to be at the beginning, because I thought kind of similarly, like, well, people aren't going to want to talk to me because they're going to think I kind of have this, more walled up faith myself. But I was really encouraged by the way that kind of conversations happen just naturally. And I found that, like, I often would just, as we talk about things, grad students especially were very stressed out, and they have very, very many demands on them, and just, it's a very difficult time. And a lot of them were still, it's early 20s, trying to deal with working, teaching this full load of courses, taking grad school, the pressures. And so a lot of times it almost come up naturally, like, do you have any, spiritual beliefs that you lean on, or what helps you get through, these stressful times? And I could kind of share about my experience too. And so again, even having done this so long and knowing that people are open, I still can fall back into, yeah, but probably not these people, or probably not this friend. It's like, this is different. But in general, I think especially in those relationships where I got to have some ongoing conversation, people really did want to hear more. Whether they agreed or not, we could both talk about our views.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's different now, or if you feel like it's more open.
Yeah, I think even because of COVID, again, I don't like COVID, and I hope it goes away someday soon. But I know too that God isn't surprised by it, and He has had plans of how He's going to use it for, long before it ever, came to our minds and became an issue in the world. So yeah, He's using this horrible thing for good, which He does all the time. He uses awful things for His good because He's God, and He can do that. So one way that COVID has been great is that it made a ton more people have questions about, like, why is this kind of thing happening in the world? And they're looking to answers outside themselves more so than ever. And so they often don't know, to look to the God of the Bible at first, but they're open when we come to talk to them about the God of the Bible. They're really open to saying, okay, tell me more about this, because if there's a loving God, why are there bad things in the world, or things like that. But they're really wanting to know, like, it used to be, even a few years ago, it seemed to be getting more so that, like, people would just use the problem of evil or XYZ just to kind of get us to be stumped. And their goal was to stump the Christian. And they'd heard from friends or media or whatever, like, oh, don't even think about Christianity because XYZ. So they just throw that in our faces or something. But now, especially with COVID, it's like, no, they're not asking questions just to stump us. They're asking questions because they're really interested. They really want to know. And yeah, they're hurting and sad, and more so, which is hard and bad, but it also is pointing them to their need for God. Even, like I said, even if they can't articulate that their need is for God, they know they have a need that they can't meet, and the world around them is not meeting for them. So it's great, but even though a lot of people were more antagonistic in conversations, even a couple of years ago compared to maybe when we were in college, there's, like Monica said, there's always, I would say more than half of people still that we would talk to are open to talk and open to hear, and definitely open to sharing what they believe and what they've encountered. And then, often open to hearing about the gospel, and whether they have questions about it or not, they're willing to hear what we think, and usually have a good conversation about it.
For those who are open and curious, what are the aspects of Christianity that seem to be attractive to this generation of college students?
Mm-hmm. I think the community aspect has always been something that has been really attractive to people. If we, like the Bible says, people will know Jesus because of how we love each other. That's a bad paraphrase, but anyways, they'll see Jesus because of our love for one another as Christians. So, when people get to, come see, even if they're walking by, sometimes like we have a pizza party or a sports day, and they're walking by and they hear us talking to each other. Sometimes that has gotten people to stop because they're like, I heard you guys talking, and there was just something about you and how you're talking with one another that was different. And so, or walking by in the Union and hearing worship music, and then they'll stand outside the room that we're meeting in and listen a little. And again, they'll just be attracted to that community. Like, why are all these people gathering and kind of loving each other, even if they don't, again, see it as they're loving each other like Christ would love. But so that's, really attractive to people. What else?
That's what I was thinking too. I think people are drawn to those relationships. Like, think of a student at Kansas State that ended up deciding to follow Jesus, and it was because her suite mates were, they were involved with Cru. They invited her to things. They loved her really well. They cared about her as a person, whether she became a believer or not. And I think she saw that, and then saw these relationships that they had with other Christians. But yeah, I think it's definitely the relationships and the community, as well as, I think, like Ryan mentioned, I think not just this generation, one before them too, and lots of people in other generations that care about really having that impact. I think they're drawn to when they can see, as Christians, we should be leading in different areas, loving people, trying to work towards racial reconciliation, or trying to bridge divides against people that we disagree with. And I think when we can do that, that's also really attractive to people to see, like, oh, they're not like just this divisive, want to live in a, their own bubble kind of people, but we're trying to make connections to other people.
It'd be interesting to see how the church would be different in our culture if we understood that. If we understood like the attractiveness of like real Christ-centered community, and how it doesn't seem like that's limited to college students. It seems like that's a kind of a universal thing, no matter how old you are. If you experience a community that welcomes you in and meets you where you're at and offers grace, because it seems like grace is one of those aspects that's pretty unique, in our culture. If somebody does something wrong, we want them to get what's coming to them, or if somebody's done us wrong, we want them to pay the price for that. So this idea of grace is that there's a God who has every right to give us what we deserve, but yet comes to the cross and takes that punishment on himself and conquers that death. Like, that is such a foreign concept that it seems like, going back to like the book of Acts and early church, that was that gracious culture, that hopeful community that was centered on the love of Christ, was just so different that it had people curious.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and that's something that I was going to talk about a little bit before, so thanks for talking about the grace aspect of things. Because even in, when we're asking people questions, one thing is, a lot of times later, months later, a student will say, I kind of got involved because that first time that we met, you asked me questions about me, and like we were saying, you really cared about me. So, and nobody else was asking me those questions, because I don't usually talk about those things with my friends. We keep things on the surface. So you going deeper was really awesome to me, like that you actually cared about me more than just what I watched or what I what team I was on or whatever. But then also, when people, like with these surveys that we do, they're the deep questions. People will often be very vulnerable, but they'll say later on, like, what it was attractive about your group, or about Christianity, was that you didn't seem surprised, or you didn't seem to judge me when I shared about the tough things in my life, or they might not even think of things they're doing as sinful at first, but when they learn that they're sinful and the things that they shared about are called sin in the Bible, but that we weren't surprised. We didn't say, oh, whoa, you did that, oh my gosh, I can't talk to you anymore, or whatever, or God doesn't love you because you did that, so you have to do XYZ, to get back in God's good favor. And instead, we just say, oh, thanks for sharing about that. That's so great that you're willing to share this with me. And boy, here's this loving God who wants to forgive you of everything that you've ever done wrong, and who wants to give you this great community and this great love and acceptance that you need. That's super key.
Yeah. It's pretty rare in our culture to find that kind of unconditional kind of love. Even as much as we talk about, you use the phrase of this is a very welcoming and accepting generation, but we are still pretty siloed around being with people who are like us, or agree with the ways that we think, whether we're, however we are on the political spectrum, or however we look at the world according to socialists. We tend to pick our friends. I mean, that's what we talk about with the cancel culture of, let me keep the people that close that think like me, and I want to drown out the voices that are different than me. But to have a church or a community that's trying to hold all of that together and say, we're going to make room to agree to disagree on some of these things, but it's our love of Christ that unifies us, that transcends some of those barriers. I don't know that there's too many things like that in our world. That seems like a very unique aspect of the Christian community, and something that I was listening to, or maybe I was reading a post this morning. I was just looking through my Twitter feed, and there was a Christian author who was saying, this is really a key time for the church, as we're coming up on election season, where people are really kind of going at each other, that the church can either add fuel to the fire, or it can really be that instrument that holds everybody together when we're kind of praying at the end. So, I think that would probably hold true on a college campus too, as you have, especially with students that are coming from overseas, exchange students and things, and students who are, on education visas, who are in America for the first time, and bringing, such a wide variety of worldviews onto a campus. There's that uniqueness of the Christian message, I would think, would shine forth even more brightly.
Definitely. Yeah.
As you are in this season of kind of trying to dig a little bit more about with COVID and everything, do you have many students who are asking you questions like, why is this happening, and where is God in this? Does that conversation come up? Have you seen that with students this year?
Yeah, with me personally, not too much. I'm meeting specifically with 3 guys for kind of discipleship group, growing in faith, and we pray together and study the Bible and things like that. And those guys haven't really talked too much about it. It's kind of just passing comments like, oh yeah, because COVID, like, I'm not doing these things that I usually do because COVID, or things like that. But there have been conversations I've heard of that other teammates have had where, especially like a couple of student leaders from last year have not really been able to lead. They've just been not in an emotional place to lead because they're so, drained and saddened, and, their life has been complicated in so many ways by COVID. And so, staff members that worked with those leaders are talking about, please pray for this person, as it's just hard for them right now. And so, talking through those things has been hard for the staff members to do, to minister well to those students. But definitely still, pointing them back to the love of Christ and to that God is bigger than all of this, and that he has plans for this that we might not know now. We might not even know in our own lives what his plans were for this time until we die and get to see him face to face. But that he is still in control, and that he does still love us, and that he does still love, those who've gotten sick that we know, and those who've died and everything. And so, yeah, it's hard, but I haven't had to deal with particularly hard, cases of students. And in my Bible study on Wednesday night that I help co-lead with a student leader, it hasn't really come up too much in there too, but it's a good thing to keep on asking about. We've prayed specifically, a couple of times in our Bible study about, people who've lost people because of COVID, or people who are sick, and, that it wouldn't, affect campus life for much longer, things like that. So it's on people's minds for sure.
Well, and the reason why I asked is I think, as you were sharing a little bit about some of the tools that you use with students and your approach to some of this conversation, it seems like the way that CRU is addressing some of these things is well suited, to have a conversation with a student who might be really wrestling with, like, where is God in this? What do I believe? Why is this happening? Where, I remember when I was growing up in the 90s, and when I was in college in the 90s, I went to a Christian college, but the heroes of the faith at that point were apologetics was such a big thing. And it was more apologetics with sort of like, I'm going to win this argument. If I can come up with a more convincing argument, then that will convince you, and then you'll decide to follow Jesus. But what I learned in, 20 years of working with youth and young adults is sometimes it's the way you have that conversation as much as what you say that leaves the lasting impression. If somebody asks me, Tom, why is this happening? How could God let this virus come to earth? If I come at them with a definitive statement, it kind of ends the conversation. But if I can kind of spool that out into a conversation, into a dialogue, typically it seems like the response from a young adult or a teenager will be like, okay, I want to go think about that. It's not like, well, I'm convinced now. It's like, I appreciate that you didn't just give me a glib answer, but that you took the time to, like, hear my pain, and I would imagine the way that you are approaching these conversations would be a similar strategy or a similar mindset behind that.
I was going to say, I think the key is empathy, and I think what you're just describing is that it's just this focus on the other person and how they're really doing, and the questions underneath the questions, and the fact that most people aren't looking for this logical 3-point reasoned argument to convince them. They want to feel heard, and they want to know that you care. And I think that's such a key. We could talk for hours about the key that would be in politics and society at large, and some of the big issues that our country's dealing with is empathy. And if you could actually put yourself in someone else's shoes and appreciate where they're coming from, how much better the conversation goes. And as Christians, I mean, honestly, that should be defining all of us all the time. And we have lots, I will speak for myself, I have lots of room to grow in that, but the more we can take that kind of approach, I think that just looks like Jesus,
Yeah, we definitely try and point people, like some of the things I said, like, to the fact that God's still in control and he has plans for this. But yeah, also, more importantly, so it's a good thing you brought stuff up again, to help me remember that, more importantly, we need to share, and we do share, that God is with us in this. He knows how we're feeling. He knows us better than we even know ourselves. He knows what we need to help us get through this. He's, wants to be with us and for us, even during this hard time and all hard times. And that he can actually relate to what we're going through, because he did come down to earth as the man Jesus. So he was fully man, just like we were, even though he's also fully God. So he's able to fully comprehend, because Jesus went through a lot of hard stuff himself, like, dying on a cross, of course, is the worst thing almost that you could ever think of going through. And so, but he went through other hard things in his life too, and he saw friends die, and he, saw the pain of people around him through human eyes. So he can totally fully relate to where we're at, and he has the power to be with us and to come in. He's, if you're a Christian, he's already in us. As, his Holy Spirit can minister to us and comfort us as we mourn, and all this kind of stuff. But then, he's able to, even in non-Christians' lives, come in at different points and help minister to their soul even before they know it's him doing it, and things like that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Man, so many things that made me think of. So I get the opportunity to talk to lots of different people doing ministry, different types of ministry. The heartbeat behind creating the show was to highlight lots of different ways that God's at work. And so I want to ask you, because your focus is specifically campus ministry, I'd love to hear your hearts about why you feel that campus ministry is so important. Like, what is the significance of campus ministry in the bigger picture of what God's doing in his kingdom? Like, why is what you do an essential part of what of the kingdom of God?
Yeah. Do you want to go first?
Go ahead.
I'll go first. Sure. Yeah. I mean, from the start, in 1951, when Campus Crusade for Christ was founded, the idea was to reach the campus today, to reach the world tomorrow. Talked about at that time the powerful percent, that about 1% of the world's population is college aged, and in colleges and universities, and that 1% of the world was, in Bill and Vonette Bright, the founders of Campus Crusade's mind, the way to reach the other 99%. That 1% had, for the most part, their whole lives ahead of them, and we're going to go be leaders in countries, and leaders in various professions all around the world, and especially now too in the U.S. So, like you said, so many international students come here. So, doing U.S. campus ministry specifically, we can reach, people from all around the world because they're coming to U.S. campuses to study. But that if we can, help students become multiplying disciples, is what we talk about. That we want, non-Christians to become followers of Christ, and then to help others follow him too. So be disciples, followers that help other people become disciples, which is spiritual multiplication. So if we can get students to spiritually multiply and make disciples who make disciples who make disciples, then that can impact the whole world, because not only are they going to be, leading in different jobs and sometimes different, political positions, all that kind of stuff, but even just everybody has influence over other people, no matter if it's thousands of other people or a dozen other people. Everybody impacts other people in their life. So multiplying disciples who are students who have hopefully 50, 60, 70 years more of their life after they graduate, to keep on multiplying, that can just impact so many people. And students are also excited about life still. They're also, like we've been talking about, even especially this generation, they're hungry to make a difference in the world around them, not to just kind of watch the world around them anymore, but to do something. And often they don't know what to do, but we can give them a really great something to do in whatever else they're doing. They can have the motivation be to point other people to the God who loves them and who created them and who wants to know them personally and who sent his son to die for them. And so they have that zeal for actually making things happen, instead of just theorizing, oh, if only more people knew God, then that would be great. They actually want to do something about it. So if we can equip them and mobilize them and show them, that as they're growing closer to Christ throughout their life, their primary purpose of their life is to multiply their faith into others, then boy, the world can change.
Yeah. Amen.
Yeah, it's such a key time, and you were touching on this, but for so many of us, those 18 to 22, whether you're in college or not, because we've worked with a lot of students too that either didn't graduate, went on to do something else, or went maybe finished at a tech school, or took off and did a completely different avenue. But that age range is so key for most of us to kind of figure out, like, yeah, what do we want to build our life on? What's my life really about? With the potential, I feel like every generation comes along, and all of us, we have, there's these studies and research, and there's concerns about how things are changing, not just for each generation, but like in the world, different things when we were kids and when, like, for kids now, challenges. And there's things to pay attention to and things that are concerning, but at the same time, every generation has such potential to continue to impact the world. And if you think about, like, this generation with their heart to leave the world better than they found it, they care about the environment, they care about the impact they're making in their communities, and to think about that kind of passion intersecting with faith in Jesus and the impact that would have to change things as we move forward, and to have hope. Because honestly, you look around, a lot of stuff going on, and it's hard to feel hopeful or to feel like, we know God's still at work, but it's easy to kind of get discouraged. And I think not dismissing every generation that comes along, there's different challenges and different things that are unique, but also different strengths. And so I know we both see that, and just the academic setting in general, working with faculty, is the same. It's just this setting of, such potential.
Yeah, man, that's awesome. Well, as we're kind of getting ready to wrap up, man, the hours go quick when we do these.
They do, yeah.
But tell our folks that are either watching or listening, if they've been listening and want to be a part of what you're doing or want to support what you're doing, how do they learn more? How do they get in touch with you guys? What are next steps for our listeners?
Yeah, thanks for asking. And if anybody is wanting to partner with us in ministry, we are so grateful that you want to know more about that. And so you can call us or text us or email us for more information, or there's a website, give.cru.org. You can CRU is CRU, yes, not CREW, but give.cru.org. And you can look us up, Ryan and Monica Reeves, on that website, and there's a little kind of more blurb about our ministry too. But we would love to connect with you personally, more so than just having you go to that website. But that website would be a place to see a little bit about us and a picture of us, and you could actually give a financial gift. We need, for sure, that's a key, and then we also need people to give financially so we can keep doing our ministry. But either way, if people give financially or pray or do both, it's great. And then also, if you're interested in actually coming to campus, to one of our campuses, we work at Johnson County Community College, UMKC, and lots of other campuses, like I said, could come and do ministry with us at any time. Not with me right now during COVID because I'm staying home, but you could even jump on a Zoom call that we have if you want to learn how to do certain things.
Yeah, probably the easiest way is our email. We can give that to you too, Tom, but it's just monica.reeves@cru.org and ryan.reeves@cru.org. And I can reach out to us, and we love to connect with people. Everybody, so we have a team of people and churches that partner with us, and we've been doing that for 18, 19 years. And that's such an encouraging part for us, because we have this whole team of people praying for the ministry, praying for us personally, that we get to pray for. And we love to have that partnership. It really is a partnership. And so, if you're, we'd love to tell you more about that if you're anything in what we've said spurred your heart towards that.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to have a conversation today. Whether you're listening to this on an Apple podcast or a Spotify podcast or watch this on YouTube, we want to encourage you to make sure that you leave a comment, share this information with other folks if you think might be interested in it. But we just want to encourage you, wherever you're at today, that you would continue to dive deeper into what God's doing in the greater community outside the four walls of the church. So thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you next time.